Guys, we are back. This is the Shillan and Duffy show on the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network and the Sherdog Radio Network. This is the recap show. This is the big show. This is the show that also gets called the After the Bell show. I mean, whatever you want to call it. We're recapping UFC. This is UFC Vegas 9, UFC Fight Night 176. Yep. UFC Fight Night, Overeem versus Sakai, but I think what we might all know as UFC only 7 fights, as this card was just cursed with the amount of people cut. Before I get to my host, I just want to tell you the fights that got canceled beforehand. Nico Montana was supposed to fight Julia Avila. Montana tested positive for COVID-19. It was removed from the card. Montana De La Rosa was originally supposed to face Marina Moros. Moros withdrew, was replaced by Vivian Araujo. Macy Chiasson was set to face Sijara Eubanks. Chiasson withdrew from the fight due to an injury, was replaced by Cara Rosa, who was hospitalized due to a weight cut issue, and that fight was completely canceled. Thiago Moises and Jalen Turner were supposed to go down, but Moises tested positive for COVID-19. And then we have the day of the fight, Marcos Rogerio de Lima versus Alexander Romanov was canceled due to Rogerio de Lima testing positive. And then we have the whole Brian Kelleher situation. Brian Kelleher was set to face Ricky Simone. Ricky Simone was taken off the card due to a cornerman testing positive for COVID-19. He was replaced by Kevin Navdad. I'm not very familiar with him. He was removed from the card the day of the fight, or late the night before. It does not say what for undisclosed reasons. And then the day of the card, Ray Rodriguez jumped in. The reason why I am telling you the card, all these people dropping out, all these cancellations, is there's one thing that everyone expected to be canceled, and that was canceling the show. Because how could you expect somebody to continue to do a show after the blatant disrespect he got from his co-host? I mean, I've had dozens and dozens of people saying to drop my co-host after he did not count my perfect 5-0 on the Sherdog rankings. But I am going to be the bigger man and bring it up 2 weeks in a row, of course.
Outstanding.
I'm going to be the bigger man, and we went through some counseling, and we're going to push through. Of course, my co-host is the Duffy to the Shillan and Duffy show. He is the senior editor of Sherdog.com. He is the great Benjamin Duffy. Ben, are you surprised that we did 2 weeks in a row?
You know what? It feels great to do 2 weeks in a row. The other thing that feels great is, I know that I'm in Central Time and you're in Eastern Time, but I could sure get used to the main event of a UFC being done at like 10:45 p.m.
I know.
Because it's one thing when a pay-per-view gets butchered, because then they have their time schedule they need to stick to. So you're still stuck in front of your screen for 7 or 8 hours, even though there's only 8 or 9 fights. But for this thing to be so condensed, and keep up decent pacing and just be done with some of the day left felt fantastic.
Yeah. And think about it. They actually pushed the card back an hour. It was originally supposed to start at 6. Imagine if it started at 6.
Yeah. That would have been like a lot of dead air in between.
Yeah.
A lot of Toyo Tire commercials. But no, this was nice.
Yeah, I can't complain about that. Remember, this is how the UFC used to be. It used to only be 7 fights. There'd be like the 5 main cards, 2 prelims with Matt Lindland buried on a prelim somewhere. And that's how it was. Speaking of the days when Matt Lindland fought, is a guy who fought way back then, guy who's got wins now in 4 different decades. He, of course, is the Demolition Man. He is Alistair Overeem. He took on, in the main event, Augusto Sakai in a really, I thought it was a pretty entertaining fight. Overeem came out on top, getting a 5th round TKO. I feel like we had good, Overeem is one of these fighters that has made so many adjustments. Like, I saw this, it was a meme, what do you call it? There was like a picture, and it had Overeem in 4 different decades. Like, he won when he started his career in the 90s, 2000s, and it talked, showed his difference in his body and all this. But also, you think about the type of fighter that has evolved. Like, when he first, when brought to my attention during Pride, he was known for his, like, long, lengthy striking, but more his athleticism, his like a flying knee or his knees in the clinch and this and that. And then he went through this phase where it was the striker suddenly knew how to grapple and he could do that standing guillotine and watch out for his quick guillotine. And then he got that K1 area where he bulked up, however you want to believe he bulked up. He bulked up and it was this devastating striker with huge knockout power. And now at the end of his career, he's a great grappler. Like, I've been saying it for a long time that Overeem is a grappler now. He's not a striker. So that's just to be able to have this longevity and still, I don't think he's ever going to win a title or anything, but to be able to, be highly ranked in the Sherdog rankings, in his 40s is so impressive to me. What do you think of Overeem right now?
I'm shocked, pleasantly shocked at the Overeem we've gotten in the UFC. When he joined the UFC, it was a little over 9 years ago. Like, Strikeforce collapsed. He took a one-off fight somewhere, and he joined the UFC. He was like 31 or 32 years old. I think his first UFC opponent was Brock Lesnar. At that point, I thought he'd probably make a dent. I was like, he's only 32. He's got some people he can beat. I think his best days are behind him. I thought he had already kind of reached the hump at that point. And I wasn't alone or crazy in thinking that. And I agree with you that, he's still a long shot to get a title shot just because there are so many people ahead of him, several of whom have beaten him already. But for us even to be talking about him as a borderline top 5 fighter at age 40, going to be 41, in I think it's March or something, unbelievable. And it speaks to, as you've already said, the adjustments he's made. He's just made very intelligent choices regarding his body, regarding his strategy, just the way he fights from minute to minute, like the kinds of opportunities and positions he looks for. It is a rare success story. We're getting around to the point where we have a few of these fighters who have fought for this long, but he's the one who has sustained success the longest and gone through the most different guises in doing so. Like, he is a much better version of what we kind of attribute to Andrei Arlovsky.
Yeah. One thing while you were talking, I was thinking of this, and I actually forgot one of the phases of Overeem, and that was the phase between the K1 champion Overeem and the one we are today. Is there was that phase where everyone thought his chin was completely shot, and he was getting knocked out by Travis Brown and this and that, and he found this way to suddenly protect his chin. It wouldn't get it. Yeah, he still got, obviously you get hit by Francis Ngannou. I don't care what kind of chin you have, but he had that phase too. It's absolutely amazing. So we'll hold off on the fight itself for a second. Let's talk about you mentioned there's a long line. They kept talking about he plans on 3 more fights after this. I don't care how many times a guy says I have this many fights, that many fights. Like, I don't trust a retirement until it's been like 10 years. Like, I just now accept that Forrest Gifford is retired. And Rich Franklin is retired. Like, okay, I feel pretty safe to say they won't fight again. So Overeem, they kept talking about this last run to get the UFC title, to get that last run. I feel safe to say, like, I don't think Overeem will ever hold a UFC title. Like, he's good. He showed he's good, but I still think he's a big step down from Stipe Miocic. Obviously, John Jones, he comes in the division. Francis Ngannou. Like, are you with me where you think he's a big step down from these guys, or do you think he's number 4, and if on the right night maybe he's number 1?
I would say he's a step down. There's nobody really ahead of him that I'd favor him against. Ironically, of the people above him in the UFC rankings, the one I'd probably feel best about him against might be Stipe Miocic.
Yeah, I actually agree. It's funny you say that. I was going to say something similar. Yeah.
And that's no disrespect to Stipe either, because I think Stipe is deservedly the champion. It's just a question of styles.
Yeah.
I think Stipe beats Ngannou again. I think I favor Stipe against Blades, even though I think Blades has a great chance. I favor Stipe, obviously, against Derek Lewis. But Overeem is a guy that has a unique set of weapons.
Yeah, There's another guy, Curtis Blades, I forgot to mention. I throw him up in that top tier above Over. I think there's a big gap between them two. You mentioned the Stipe Miocic being the guy that he's most likely of those ones to beat, and I totally agree. And we've seen that. I mean, their first fight, when Overeem fought for the title, he almost stopped Stipe Miocic, and there was a whole point of I thought he tapped, and all that controversy. But let's talk about this fight right here. There was some really good moments and bad moments. And to me, what stood out is Overeem is the ultimate professional, that he found a weakness and then he exposed it, and that was Augusto Sakai's takedown defense and his inability to scramble back to his feet. On the broadcast, they kept talking about, Sakai wanting to wrestle, and I was just thinking, really? Overeem is – I don't know why, people think – they don't think of Overeem as this grappler. And I know I've already said this before, but I'm saying it again, Overeem's a very good grappler, one of the best in the division. One of the guys who's when I was thinking about the legacy of Overeem, one of the things that's going to first jump to my head, 10 years from now is going to be how drastically underrated his ground game was, because he's really good. I mean, on this run, who was the last guy he beat up on the feet? Washed up Junior Dos Santos, You know what I mean? He's
probably
he's taking down Walt Harris, or he's getting to the ground. Walt Harris, Sergey Pavlovich, Augusto Sakai. On the feet, he does this back up and cover thing. He does that shelling up against the cage thing, which I still really worries me. I think some of that is the cost that going back to that protecting the chin. But I also think some of that is he has to fight at a slow pace. They kept talking about the output of Sakai versus the output of Overeem. When you get to a certain age, cardio is a skill set. People forget that. They just think cardio is something you have. No, it's something you have to work with. But also, it also fades as you get older. We saw it with Daniel Cormier a couple weeks ago. We were talking about that's not the same Daniel Cormier's output that he did against Alexander Gustafsson. I feel the same way, and I think that's why Overeem fights the way he does. Because one, he's got to protect his chin. Two, he knows he can't have this huge output. But also, he knows he needs to grapple. But he needs to have enough in the tank to be able to grapple in case it goes 25 minutes.
Completely agree. And no, it's very worrisome when he backs straight up into the cage and shells up like this. There were, in the first two rounds, I think even once in the third, before Overeem really took over, there were multiple occasions where Sakai would just get him up against the cage and throw long combinations of punches. And a lot of them would clatter off the guard. A few of them would get through. And every time I was like, man, one of these is going to be the one that buckles Overeem's knees, and then we're all going downhill. I from 15 years of watching Alistair Overeem, that's just ground into my memory. It's one of these is going to touch him behind the ear or on the chin, and it's going to be on its way to over. And it didn't. The defense worked, and you pointed out about the wrestling. Man, Overeem's offensive wrestling has long been underrated, but Sakai made it look easier than it needed to. Yeah. Just Overeem was doing these weird lateral drop arm drag type things where practically it's just that Sakai looked like he was falling down already, and Overeem made sure to land on top, and then just guard passes basically just by hopping over his knees, just basically hopped over his guard into side control. Yeah, he just completely ran game on him once it was on the ground.
Yeah, and guys, if you're listening at home, don't misinterpret what I'm saying. I'm not saying that Alistair Overeem is the best MMA wrestler since Alexander Karelin had an MMA debut. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that. I'm just saying when we think people always think of this, because he won the K1 kickboxing championship, they think of this Dutch kickboxer, and I think that's a vast disservice to who Alistair Overeem. I think he is I think Alistair Overeem is a really good example, especially at heavyweight, of a well-rounded. This is a mixed martial arts. If you're trying to explain to somebody MMA, you see all assets: boxing, Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, wrestling. He does it all. That's what I think of Alistair Overeem. This fight was fun. I agree with what you said about Sakai. I thought when I was watching, oh man, Sakai's gonna put him out. This is gonna be the moment where Alistair Overeem falls down to, the lower half of the Sherdog rankings, or completely to the bubble. The honorable mentions, and now suddenly Sakai is gonna be 8 or 9, and this is the rise of Sakai. And Overeem was able to withstand it. And once he started getting the takedowns, it was a completely different fight. And he just turned into wrestling mode where he knew he wasn't even striking him. He was closing distance, getting the takedowns. I had it 2-2 heading into the 5th round. I know some people actually had it 3-1 for Overeem. Some people, I think the second round, some people gave Overeem. Did you have it the same way heading into the 5th?
I had it.
I think I can tell you.
Yeah, I don't. I had it 2-2. Overeem looked good at the end of the second round, but I thought Sakai won most of that round. And then the third was Overeem. The fourth was very obviously Overeem, but I didn't think it was a 10-8 because again, Sakai looked pretty good in the first part of the round. It was by the end that Overeem was just like stapling him with those elbows where, God, who was the first one to do it? Was it Matt Hughes? Was it John Jones? Where they like brace their hand on the dude's face and then just drop the elbows?
Yeah, I know Tito Tease did a lot of that, and Tito did a lot of the rolling with the elbows and stuff.
Yeah, but I mean that was over. He was so dead at the end of the 4th round that when they went to the ground at the beginning of the 5th, the way like as soon as they hit the ground, Sakai kind of turned to the side. I was like, is he going to tap the mat?
Yeah, he broke. Like, he broke. He broke.
And it makes me wonder if maybe like something was hurting him badly at the end of the 4th. And, if there'd been 10 more seconds in that round, it might have been over, Yeah. Like I'm not calling the guy's heart into question. Who knows what was hurting and how. But yeah, as soon as they hit the ground, I was like, oh, this is over.
Yeah. I mean, one thing when we think about Alistair Overeem, as we talked about all these different areas of Alistair, one thing we didn't talk about that as soon as you see him, he's an absolute physical specimen. I mean, he is like, I remember a couple weeks ago during, I keep bringing this up, the DC Miocic fight, there was like a meme going on about like these big buff guys and like, this is what people think is the baddest dudes on the planet. And then there was a picture of Stipe Miocic eating breakfast with like big, thick Clark Kent glasses on and like Daniel Cormier at the beach looking all fat and like, no, this is what they really are. But Alistair Overeem is that top one. Like he fits the look. Going back 10 years, you don't want him at 40, but 10 years ago, the UFC would have loved to have Alistair Overeem as a champion. He has the look. He's scared. I mean, like he's shredded. Like who's gonna say look at some boxing champion and then look at Alistair Overeem and be like, yeah, he's gonna beat that guy. Look at him. He had muscles on top of muscles on top of muscles, and he's not that Ubereem as he was 10 years ago, but he is. I mean, is there a heavyweight still more ripped than Alistair Overeem?
No, I mean, like you got
Cyril
like
Gane?
Czech Congo.
Okay, Czech Congo.
Like if you're
Cyril
talking
Gane.
about guys that are around the same age, like
sure,
because Congo's like 41, 42. But aside from that, no. And the thing is, Congo's never been better than like a pretty good heavyweight, whereas Overeem's been a top 10 guy in whatever division he was competing in for like 15 years now. It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
closer to 20.
Yeah, I think you're onto something. Like either Sakai was hurt, or I think he just mentally broke at that point. Yeah, he's his first. He talked about his first main event, his first real. I mean, he beat Andre Arlovski, but like this was his first really big moment. And deep in the fight, he was doing so well, and then he broke. And I think a lot of that has to do with just that. Not only does Alistair Overeem have so much experience in just the total number of fights he has, he also has so much high-level experience. I mean, he's fought in every heavyweight. He's fought. I mean, he used to be a light heavyweight. He's fought some of the best light heavyweights. Vanderlei Silva. I mean, not Vanderlei. Chuck Liddell and I mean, I can't think of who else. Shogun.
Oh.
And like he's fought like top light heavyweights and then heavyweight everybody. So
yeah, Shogun I think, twice. Arona, Little Nog twice, Vitor twice, Chuck Liddell.
I think he fought Vitor 3 times, didn't he?
Did you?
I feel like he fought him 3 times. Maybe it was only twice. Maybe. Yeah. But anyways, he's fought every. So let's talk about it. So let's transcend to that. He's in his 40s now. Alistair Overeem's always going to be hard. Like 10 years from now, it's going to be hard to. He's a UFC Hall of Famer, and based on his resume, but also something I used to say with John Franklin time. Everybody gets in the UFC Hall of Fame. I mean, like Alistair Overeem has a much better resume than Maurice Smith has.
Sure.
So he'll be in the Hall of Fame one day. But what about his overall legacy? So I want to do this in 2 parts. I want to do when you think 10 years from now, when Alistair Overeem is retired, hopefully, what what were your thought of being him? And then I'll get to the second part in a second.
An all-time great because of the just length and just comprehensive nature of his legacy, but a guy that was the one of the best in the world for a very long time. But the actual window where you can say, hey, this guy might have been the best heavyweight or the best light heavyweight on earth, if it exists at all, it's very narrow windows. Very, very kind of like an economy-sized Dan Henderson legacy.
Dude,
fought forever, fought so many guys.
I was writing Dan Henderson down. I was writing his name down.
Yeah, just incredible longevity, fought everybody, beat more than his share of them, gave us an all-timer of a highlight reel, both on the giving and the receiving end. That's Hall of Fame to me. Check
and
all the boxes other than, what's your individual highlight. And his highlight might have been when he was the best heavyweight in Strikeforce for a minute.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think Dan Henderson is the perfect one because both guys have major championships. You talk about Alistair Overeem, Strikeforce champion. He won the Dream Championship. K1, I know that was kickboxing, but K1 champion. Like one time, he had the belts of every organization but the UFC, major organization but the UFC. Yeah. Dan Henderson at one time was a 2-division Pride champion. But when we talk about these guys, they never get to do because they don't have the UFC championship, and that takes away from their legacy. And both guys were extremely close from winning a championship. You go to Dan Henderson against Michael Bisping, that was a very close fight. You go to Alistair Overeem against Stipe Miocic, he almost had him out. Even Dan Henderson against Anderson Silva, people forget, he won the first round against Anderson Silva. He took him down, used his Greco-Roman Olympic level wrestling, and then the second round he's like, oh yeah, I'm Dan Henderson, I like to throw my right hand, and he forgot that Anderson Silva might be the greatest striker in the history of MMA. And this was prime Anderson Silva. This isn't today's Anderson Silva. So let's do this a second because and I know his career is not complete, so we might be cheating a little bit, but let's see. Like we're not going to do the too long. Guys, we only got 6 more fights to do, and it's not that relevant. This is the most relevant of the night. So I want to compare Alistair Overeem to other heavyweights, and you tell me better or worse. Okay, like legacy. Not saying fighting right now. I mean career. We'll throw out Stipe Miocic. We'll throw out Fedor Emelianenko. I think we both. He's not there. Those are the. If we're making a Mount Rushmore of heavyweights, they have the first 2 spots, and now everyone else is competing for the last 2. Dan Cormier.
I'd put Cormier above him. He beat more top heavyweights closer to their prime, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the biggest Dan Cormier shill there is, and it's so amazing when half his career was more than half his career was in another weight class. So yeah, I'm going to go with Dan Henderson. I'm going to go with another guy who's very similar to Dan Henderson. This is before I was a media member. I was obviously a fan first. This is my all-time greatest, my favorite fighter of all time, Randy Couture. He was a 3-time UFC champion. I put him over Alistair Overeem. How about you? And I'm eliminating all his light heavyweight. I'm talking strictly heavyweight.
Strictly heavyweight? Man, it's really close just because that UFC belt does weigh heavily. But man, when I look at the people that Couture beat to win the belt, on those occasions, well, Tim Sylvia.
Good, but yeah, I get what you're saying. It's not Stevie. He didn't when he won the belt. He beat. Let's see. He beat Kevin Randleman. He beat Mo Smith first. Kevin Randleman, and Tim Sylvia. All 3 good wins. None of them are Stipe Miocic. Like he didn't face Stipe Miocic level heavyweight when like Alistair Overeem had to.
Yeah,
but he's got 3 of them. And a couple title defenses in there too.
He's got 3 of them. He has a total of 3 title defenses. He was tied with Sylvia and Miocic until Stipe won last month. Man,
I'm biased. I'm going with my man Randy, but it's close. But this is my whole.
Super.
But see, this is the whole reason why I wanted to bring this up, and the reason why I wanted to bring this up is Alistair Overeem's always felt like this legendary guy, but like the next level down. Well, Randy Couture is like just cemented in, and then when you really dig into it, the fact that we have to discuss it when we really dig into it, that it's a debate, is why I think Alistair Overeem has been like criminally underrated.
I do think his legacy is underrated.
All right, how about this one? So who did you pick?
I think I'm going to go with Overeem.
Okay, all right. 2 weeks in a row, he's wronged me. I got another one for you, and this is one. When I was looking at it, it's a lot closer than I would have felt like it should have been. Like if I asked you this, I would have been like Antonio Nogueira, no doubt. But when you dig into it, I'm like, it might be Overeem. I'm going to end up going with Nogueira, simply the fact that he won the UFC. I mean, it was only interim, but he won the UFC title and a Pride title. He won the two major titles.
Won the UFC title, won the Pride title. Who's his best win against?
Crow Cop.
Yeah, I'd say, his best win is...
Couture. Probably Crow Cop. At that time, Crow Cop.
Yeah.
Overall, like name value, I would go Couture, but at the time, Crow Cop.
Yeah, and once you get past those, you're down to like...
that's
Coleman.
My point. That's my point.
Schaub.
That's why, like, when you really dig into it, it might be Overeem. But based on strictly accomplishment, it's got to be Nogueira, right?
Again, Nogueira is more accomplished as far as like the milestones you think of, the titles he won,
Sure.
Like just the biggest fight in the world size fights that he was in, win or lose. But Overeem, just the longevity. You look at the list of people he's beaten.
Yeah.
And even just head-to-head comparison. He just very clearly and obviously beat Fabricio Verdum the last two times they fought. Verdum tapped Nogueira out the last time they fought, and
that's this is the whole reason why I bring this up. That it's guys that we've always put in our top 10, our top 15 fighters, regardless of weight class. We've never put Alistair Overeem in that area, and the fact that when we really dig in and go through the resume, maybe we should, or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe we're ranking the other guys too high.
Well, and it's kind of snuck up on us, at least snuck up on me, because he has continued to win relevant fights long after I'd kind of written him off.
That's right. Me too.
Again, I didn't think he was done 9 years ago, but I thought his best days were behind him. Yeah. I did not expect him to contend for a UFC title. I did expect him to beat Brock Lesnar because I was like, who would be the absolute worst person to go out and fight after you've had like an abdominal, a resection of your intestine? The absolute last person in the world I would want to fight is Alistair Overeem.
But a guy that attacks your stomach and has underrated takedown defense.
Yeah. But just in the last couple of years, Sakai, Harris, Olenek, all those guys, we don't talk about them in the same legendary terms as people like Crow Cop, but they were all top 10, top 15 guys who had been on hot streaks.
Yeah.
Like Sakai had won the 6 fights in a row, and the last 4 had been against decent UFC heavyweights. Okay,
I'm gonna do a couple more because I want to prove a point now. So I know we're ShareDog. I probably shouldn't be using it, but I was just going off of Tapology. They have it's kind of fan voted, a little computer generated. I don't like their formula, but just using it as reference. Guys that are ranked according to Tapology above Alistair Overeem in the all-time list. Okay? Cain Velasquez. I think a prime Cain Velasquez beats a prime Alistair Overeem.
I think a prime Cain Velasquez beats any fighter who ever walked the earth. I still believe that. I still think the 2015-ish version of Cain, the one that beat JDS in the rematch, that guy is the baddest man ever to walk the planet. But I'm not even going to compare his overall legacy to other top heavyweights. Yeah,
his resume is not as good as Alistair Overeem's.
No, it's not.
Alistair
Overeem
should be higher.
It's not even close because he was healthy for such a short time, and he wasted that whole time fighting nobody but JDS and Bigfoot Silva. So it's just a shame. They should have sent him on a world tour for like that year or two.
Yeah. Now, Fabricio Verdum is a guy that's ranked higher, and I think he might. That's to me is the guy that you got to really have to think. I mean, Fabricio Verdum has got wins over Cain Velasquez, has wins over Fedor, so I'm probably going to go put him because he has a win over pretty much all the top guys we said. Like Verdum has him, so I'm going to put Verdum over Overeem. How about you?
I would agree, even though Overeem owns the head-to-head trilogy.
Yeah.
But even so, overall, again, I'm just going by more top-quality wins, fewer bad losses.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go with here's the 3 next heavyweights, and I might have missed someone. I'm just kind of scrolling through. I didn't write these down. Here's the 3 next, and I'm going to put them together. I put Alistair Overeem over all these guys, and I think it's pretty easy. And all these guys, based off of this one website's rankings, but also I think generally fans' opinion would have them over him, and that's Mirko Cro Cop, Junior Dos Santos, and Bas Rutten. I put Overeem over all 3 of those guys like easily.
So do I. No question on those. Cro Cop, and this is going to sound like bashing. It is not. You won't find a bigger Cro Cop fan than me. He was the scariest dude on the planet when I started watching this sport. I was wishing and hoping he'd beat Fedor when they finally met. So don't take this the wrong way, but his resume and legacy are very much overrated just because he was so spectacular and he was so cool. He was what we all thought and hoped a top kickboxer crossing over to MMA would look like. And I certainly fall straight into that. But no, again, his top wins, he absolutely just had Josh Barnett's number.
Yeah.
And he kicked the head off of the most roided up Vanderlei Silva that ever was. And those are his top. Those are his top wins.
And that's a light heavyweight we're talking about. Josh Barnett, like one of his losses was a fight against Barnett during the semifinals where in the finals after Barnett had that absolute war against Nogueira. Like everything wasn't equal in those fights. He beat him 3. He has a loss to Kevin Randleman. Like he has a loss. He had a loss against a very, very early Mark Hunt.
Yeah. The crazy thing is, even though Cro Cop we think of as like this ultimate pride star who kind of fell off once he got to the UFC, his UFC resume is better than this Pride resume.
It probably is.
He beat more good fighters in the UFC than he did in Pride.
Yeah. And if you go into his like Bellator days and his Ryzen days, he might have some more names on that resume.
Hey, the man's on a 10-fight win streak.
Yeah, if we're talking about just names, like he might have more names like Roy Nelson. That's not a good win anymore, but like Roy Nelson and King Mo, and he might have better names on his resume, or at least close. I'm not saying better. Don't come at me, but you get my point.
He even got even with Gonzaga before he left the UFC.
Yeah, there you go. So that's not. I didn't expect to go that far through it, but that's what happens when me and Ben, we both like to talk about the history of the sport. So, anyways, let's do some matchmaking real quick. Let's start with Overeem. Do you have a matchup for Overeem next?
Thing about Overeem is, he deserves someone ahead of him. He's won too many fights, and he's too old to fight someone below him. It's a lot like Miocic, where he's like, I don't know when I'm retiring, but I know I don't want to go back and start fighting the number 15 guy. Volkov is basically the only guy ahead of him in the rankings. Volkov and Lewis are the only guys ahead of him in the rankings. I think he hasn't fought yet. Lewis is fighting in November against Blades. I don't know if Overeem wants to wait that long, but Lewis was letting them have it over Twitter. The UFC kept putting up Lewis's tweets, or he just was just making fun of him. And around that Overeem clearly won, Lewis was like, yeah, I give that one to Sakai 10-7 because Overeem kept talking. I don't know if Overeem wants to wait that long, but the winner of that would be great, even if it's Blades again. Volkov and Walt Harris are fighting next month if he wants to take the winner of that, I mean, he's already fought Harris, but he hasn't fought Volkov. But that's kind of like what we're stuck with. Yeah. There's a chance that his next opponent is someone he's already fought.
Yeah, you kind of hit it on the head. This is the problem with Alistair. He's been around for so long. He's fought everybody, and a lot of those guys that you mentioned, he fought fairly recently ago. And then you have this just lineup of guys at heavyweight right now. You have Francis Ngannou, who UFC says is next. You got John Jones, who's moving up to heavyweight. I still say, if anybody gets to deserve to skip, if Cody Garbrandt gets to skip the line at flyweight, then John Jones gets to skip the line at heavyweight.
Yeah, but you reminded me, if John Jones wants to move up to heavyweight and they don't want to slot him right in and against,
no, don't say it.
Jones versus Overeem.
No. I get it, and I know people will say that, and John Jones versus anyone's going to sell. But if John Jones, there's only two options for John Jones if he goes to heavyweight, in my opinion. It's instant title fight, or freaking the guy that I still think it's a pipe dream. This is coming back, but the Brock Lesnar fight that was rumored, and the Brock Lesnar coming back, which I still think that's not happening. And then the other guy is if Curtis Blades beat Derek Lewis, he's already beat Overeem, he's got all this win. If I'm Curtis Blades' manager, I'm telling him, just wait. You're in that Leon Edwards situation where you've beaten everybody. So my kind of matchmaking are all when you do that path, if yes, go this way, if no, go that way. And I feel the same way. If Derek Lewis beats Curtis Blades, which I really don't think that's going to happen, but if he does, Alistair Overeem. If that doesn't happen, if Volkov beats Walt Harris, do that one. If he doesn't, if both those go the wrong way, I guess you could do the Harris rematch, but that'd only be one fight removed for both of them. Mm-hmm. Honestly, you have to go down to Ben Rothwell, you rematch Rothwell and get that fight back. It's not sexy, but I don't know. I'm just saying, there's nothing left, so you kind of hope Volkov beats Harris.
Yeah.
Sakai, I don't think Sakai had a terrible showing. I think he is a clear area he needs to improve. I think he had moments he looked really good. But the matchup I went with for him is Sergey Pavlovich. And I hate kind of booking guys outside the top 15 who kind of obviously Augustus Sakai he's not a new heavyweight, but he kind of feels new to the UFC, new to at least to the upper echelon, or where they kind of start in the picture. Dude. No, I don't mean upper, where he starts to matter.
I'm agreeing with you, dude. He's 29 years old. Yeah. I assume that if I walk up to Augustus Sakai, a 29-year-old top 15 heavyweight, he must smell like new car.
Yeah.
29 is a baby.
He comes with a half a tank of gas, a free half tank of gas. Yeah, so, but he's new. They're both new. But the problem is what we just said. Everybody's in line, and you can't have these guys just facing the Ben Rothwells forever, and then they're gonna have to eventually. So I went with Sergey Pavlovich, and one of these guys is gonna have to get knocked off. Who would you go with?
I'm fine with the loser of either of the two fights that we just talked about for Overeem. I'm also fine with Pavlovich. I'm also fine with Alexei Oleinik.
Oh yeah, go the old and young. Yeah.
Yeah.
The only reason why at this point where I don't want to put the young guy against the old guy is if the old guy wins, it really sucks for you if you're the UFC. If Oleinik beats Pavel, I mean, if Oleinik beats one of those guys, I guess you didn't have much anyways. So I guess that's the way to look at it. Let's move on, guys. The rest of the card is not nearly. I shouldn't say it doesn't mean as much when it comes to the overall rankings, the scheme of title picture. But in the co-main event, we had Ovince St. Preux. He knocked out Alonzo Menifin in the second round in a knockout that I think is one of the contenders for knockout of the year. It was absolutely beautiful. Step back, left hook. Alonzo Menifin, man, I don't know what to say about this one. I was so disappointed in his performance. He gassed out in his last fight, and he was fighting so much to not gas out that he was doing nothing. And then finally, when he's maybe I should do something, he runs right into a perfectly placed lefty. The first time he got aggressive, he got knocked out. I don't know what else to say. Great performance by Ovince St. Preux.
A fantastic performance by Ovince St. Preux. I had St. Preux in this, and honestly, I had him by something like this. I mean, Menifield obviously gassed out really badly in his fight against Devin Clark earlier this year, but St. Preux, for a guy who's as good a fighter as he is, I still think his performance in the last Nikita Krylov fight, the second time they fought, that is the worst cardio I've ever seen from a top 15 or better fighter outside of heavyweight, like ever in all my time of watching this sport. It was unbelievable how fast he gassed out. And so I was like, well, you know what? This is a fight where probably cardio won't be a factor. They'll either both get tired at the same rate or they won't. But St. Preux is a super cagey veteran. As wild and disjointed as his style looks, I was like, Menifield leaves himself too exposed.
Yeah.
And St. Preux is going to find something. He's either going to just take him down with a nice reactive takedown and choke him out, or he's going to just knock him cold when he's out over his feet, hands down. It took longer than I expected just because Menifield was pretty conservative, but that I don't call him like dead right very often, but this is exactly what I expected this fight to look like.
Now, going back to that Krylov fight, do you think that was a kind of like a one-time issue for OSP, like where this guy's been around for a long time, and I mean, you go about he went the distance with Dominic Reyes. I mean, he's going the distance, fought hard. Like he hasn't been a guy who's he's not Colby Covington. He's not coming out there with his high pace, but he's not a guy who he's not Phil Baroni who gasses out after 2 minutes. Like, do you think that was just an outlier against Krylov?
I think his gas tank is always a little suspect. Like sometimes it holds up great, other times it doesn't. It is sometimes dependent on the pace that's imposed on him or the pace that he sets. Other times it's just mysterious. I think there's a big difference in how much his final water cut is. Like whether he's walking into fight week at, 218 or 232. Yeah. And this fight, he looked small. He did not look quite as bricked up as usual. So I think it was probably a good camp for him. And then the second Krylov fight, I think he went into it a little wild. I think he blew more energy early on than he might otherwise have against another opponent, just because he figured he'd find something easy against Krylov and just embarrass him like he did the first time.
Yeah. And I mean, they mentioned it on the broadcast that he looked a lot thinner than usual, more ripped up. And then afterwards, they talked about him not cutting much weight. They did that on the post-fight interview with John Anik. We talked about that. So, yeah, maybe that. I mean, his output was way more than Menifield's, but that wasn't really saying much. But speaking of guys who gas out, on the main card, Michel Pereira did not gas out. He actually picked up a win over Zelim Imadaev by third-round submission, though there is a little bit of controversy in that, where he gets credited for a rear naked choke with 21 seconds left in. His Imadaev's hands did move to his hands. Was it in a tapping motion, or was it just your natural fight the hands? I don't know, which is sad because Michel Pereira has had unbelievably outstanding moments in MMA with his crazy flips, and then he's also had these terrible moments. You figure he lost in one of the biggest upsets in the history of the sport against Tristan Connolly in a fight where he was, putting up a 10-7 round and then suddenly gassed out. He had that match against Diego Sanchez where he's killing him, and then illegal knee. And now he has this situation. Like, this guy needs a win. He doesn't need, any controversy. I know you were talking about, there's a chance they could actually overturn this to no contest, which would be absolute robbery of...
Well, the thing is, it's a travesty either way. I mean, if Chris Tognoni called this fight with 20 seconds left and Imadaev had not actually tapped, that's a bit of a travesty there. He deserved the 20 seconds to escape. Maybe, I mean, I know it's not likely, but win the fight, or at least just go down as, hey, I lost a lopsided decision versus a finish. That would be a miscarriage of justice. Yeah. If this gets flipped over to a no contest, that's when it moves into robbery of the year material, because this was a complete steamrolling by Pereira, and if it doesn't count as a win on his record, that really sucks. For as much as this dude has been a clown and I can't stand him, and just in so many cases the author of his own misery in his UFC run, he did everything right here, and it would be a shame for him to be robbed of such an amazing performance. Yeah, it's just a weird situation because, like you said, there was 21 seconds left. Is it likely that Imadaev's going to pull it off? No, but you know what? Maybe he throws one, rolls to his back. Pereira tries something stupid because it's 21 seconds, does a flying backflip, and he gets kicked in the face
on his way down, or I mean, we saw Paul Craig with 1 second left in a fight that he was getting absolutely destroyed in. Yeah. So yeah, it's a weird situation. I'm going to guess that they don't overturn it.
I think you're probably right. I hope that's the case.
It's rare for them to overturn things anyways.
It is
unless
very
someone
rare.
Smokes weed. Unless someone smokes weed, then they will.
Well, then you know.
A referee completely screws it up. No. Someone smokes weed. Yeah, no contest. Yeah. And this portion of the Sure Dog Radio Network is brought to you by Billy Bob's Thong Warehouse. Hit up. So let's talk about Michel Pereira. Let's talk about before the 21 seconds. You said he did everything right. He looks spectacular to me. I mean, this guy, I'm going to say something. He was exciting when he first came to the UFC, when you saw the video of him doing the backflip off the cage on the regional scene. Then he actually did it in fights. It was exciting. But to me, what's more exciting is seeing a guy that has all the tools to be a top contender and actually fight the right way and become like a new blood in the division. Like, he looked great to me. The fact that he can do all these crazy capoeira kicks, and I mean, he even did a Showtime. He did like the Showtime Anthony Pettis kick, but he did it with a punch instead and landed it. But his athleticism is unmatched. Like in the whole division, his accuracy. He's extremely accurate. He has so much variety in his attacks. Like, going onto the body, then he kicked the leg, and then he'd do a spinning back fist, and he'd jab, and like he had him guessing the whole fight. And that to me is someone who likes, if anybody listens to the show, you can tell I like that part. I like studying that part. It's exciting to me. Like, this guy is fun. And I say, look how this guy fought last night. Imagine that guy fought Diego Sanchez, the Diego that like has a win against him. Think about how bad the gassed out Michel Pereira did to Diego Sanchez. Imagine if this guy, who actually controlled his, didn't waste his energy doing moonsaults and shit. This guy is like, he looks like a contender to me. No, it's Zelim Emadaev, who's 0-3 in the UFC now, or lost his last 3 in the UFC. Like, maybe I'm getting too excited about this guy based off of that, but from just a talent, looking at excellent, he does a lot of things right. What's your overall take of Michel Pereira?
He looked fantastic, and the funny thing is, it's not as if he completely abandoned all the weird flying techniques, because I picked Imadaev to win this one, and at the end of the first round, I still thought he was going to win. It's what I expected it to look like. I expected the first round, Pereira would probably win. He'd probably just do all of his like weird, crazy things, Superman punches, jump off the cage punches, capoeira kicks, and then he'd either do something stupid and get DQ'd or gas out and just drop the last 2 rounds like he had done in his last 2 fights. When he didn't get tired, and Imadaev kind of kept waiting for him to. I feel as though Imadaev watched Pereira's last 2 fights and just was kind of like, all I got to do is survive the first round, keep throwing punches. This guy will get tired, and I'll have this in the late rounds. And it just never happened. Like, with a minute left in the last round, Pereira like did a belly to back suplex and dumped him on his dome. Yeah, it was unbelievable that he just still had that much in his tank.
Yeah, I actually wrote that down. Yeah, it's funny because when I was making my pick for this fight, I originally was picking Emadaev all week, and then I started thinking about it. I'm like, the only way, and I was doing the same thing. Like, he's going to gas himself out, and Emadaev's going to win like second or third round. And then I started saying, like, wait a minute, Imadaev needs Pereira to do something, and that's to act like a fool. If he doesn't act like a fool, he wins. And I'm like, maybe he just doesn't act like a fool. Maybe he's sick of like taking home half his pay because he wants to excite the crowd. And then also like, wait a minute, excite the crowd doesn't pay the electric bill, So that's why I ended up going with Pereira. I was like, maybe he doesn't act like a fool, and he didn't. Really impressive. Anything else you want to say about this fight?
Just that I can't believe you said that so clearly, because it's something that's always foremost in my mind is when I find myself thinking that one fighter's only real plausible path to victory is for the other fighter to make a mistake or to do something strategically inadvisable. I don't know how I didn't see that one coming down the pike on this one, but you deservedly picked this one right while I picked it wrong.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't have said it better.
Just like I deservedly got 5 wins last week that I didn't get.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't even know if I'm the king of killing a joke. Like, that joke, like, it's already got not funny anymore. And 2 years from now, I'm going to keep bringing that up.
And I'll laugh every time, but you're still not getting the points.
Before that, we had Andre Munoz versus Bartosz Fabinski. Very quick submission win for Andre Munoz. This was one of the ones, and I don't like to do this often. Like, I'm going to I do like pat myself on the back of it, but I don't like analyzing odds because I'm not a gambler. I'll admit it. I don't gamble. I think I've said it to you before. I'm like, my dad had a gambling problem when I was a little kid, so I don't gamble. I play fantasy football, but I'm saying I don't gamble. But on the breakdown of the Contender Series, there was a fight where Jose Johnson was a huge favorite, and I was like, no, do the film study. He should not be a huge favorite. The other guy should actually be a huge favorite. And every smart shark, whatever you call these gambling people, were like, "Oh, you're so wrong." One guy was challenged me on Twitter to make a bet, and then when my guy smashed Johnson, he didn't respond back to Twitter. But this is another one that was like, why is Munoz the underdog? Like, Munoz is better on the feet, and Fabinski wants to wrestle. And if he takes Munoz down, Munoz is a world-class jiu-jitsu guy. Like, he wants to be taken down. Like, this to me was a very easy fight to pick. How did you feel about this fight heading? Yeah, I know you're a guy who likes to study the guy. Like, how did you feel beforehand? Did you feel the same way I felt?
I definitely wasn't as I didn't see it as clearly as you did, but I just thought, Munoz by some form of submission or just severe out grappling was a pretty likely scenario, at least more so than the odds and most of the predictions seem to say.
Yeah, and so basically, Fabinski went for a takedown. He dropped down on a double. Munoz jumped onto a guillotine. I thought he had the guillotine. He broke it. He adjusted his hands. Then when he adjusted his hands, I definitely thought he had a second time. And then after that, he switched to, I believe was it an armbar he finished him with?
It was a triangle armbar. So it's so nice. Yeah, he got the triangle on, and it's just one of my favorite submissions to watch play out when you've got a guy who's good on the bottom and just is able to outmaneuver the other guy. And it's just the Verdum versus Fedor thing where, choose your poison. I'm a step ahead of you. And it's either going to be a triangle or a triangle armbar. Yeah, but beautiful.
Yeah, and speaking of a beautiful submission, right before that, Brian Kelleher took on his third opponent or I should say didn't take on his third opponent, but he got his third opponent for this matchup. He originally was supposed to take on Ricky Simone. Ricky Simone was replaced by Kevin Nafeded. I'm saying his name wrong. I apologize. And then it was Ray Rodriguez came in. Brian Kelleher said on the broadcast he was told the night before. It didn't break to the news till noontime, 7 hours before.
Yet something was clearly going on because they had Rodriguez weigh in without an opponent, and this was the only other featherweight matchup on the card. Knew. So yeah, maybe somebody in the Tividad's camp, had a possible positive COVID test or something, and they were just waiting for that to come back. But whatever it was, Rodriguez was the man on the spot for about 39 seconds.
I messaged a guy. I'm not going to mention his name because I don't want to put him on blast, but there's actually a featherweight. I messaged a guy's fought in the UFC before. He's a regional champion. He's currently out of the UFC, and he's kind of getting up there in age, but maybe he could have one more run. And he's never going to be a UFC title challenger. He's never going to be in the rankings, but maybe he gets a couple wins in the UFC, a couple losses, and he's out. Ends his career. And I messaged him, and I'm like, dude, are you staying on weight? What's up? And he's like, nah, I'm done with the pipe dream. I'll take a fight if I get, 8 to 10 weeks notice, but I'm not doing one of these late runs. And I'm like, dude, this is your only chance of getting in. It's be ready. If you're a if you're a good, not even good, not even a great, just good, above average, Parker Porter level. If you're that guy, you should be staying on. You should have your manager calling Sean Shelby, Nick Mann, whoever they know in the UFC every time, because there is opportunities for guys to get in the UFC right now. This is the most opportunity you've ever had is to win. Do that. But anyways, back to this fight. Brian Kelleher. There's not much to say. Rodriguez actually caught Kelleher with a nice punch and then shot in on the takedown. As soon as he shot in, Brian Kelleher jumped to a guillotine. He did everything that Dustin Poirier wished he could do when Dustin Poirier jumps on a guillotine. He locked it up perfectly. It was cinched in. Ray Rodriguez tapped.
Now, having said that, it has been about 10 years since Dustin Poirier fought someone at Ray Rodriguez's level.
You know what?
Just to be fair to the poor guy.
Yeah. Every single time someone jumps on a guillotine, I always think of Dustin Poirier. But you know what? I'll give you that. That is a very fair point. Brian Keller, he said something on the post-fight broadcast that I think it was a good point. He said he felt all the pressure because he was on his third opponent. This guy was taking the fight on less than a day's notice. That guy is not supposed to win. Keller is, a veteran at this point, got some pretty good wins in the UFC. That he felt all the pressure, and that's why I think he should get some credit. I think that was
Completely agree. I mean, because you have nothing to gain and everything to lose when you're Brian Kelleher in that situation. Where if you just go out and kind of beat the guy 29-28. Across all three scorecards, your stock actually goes down.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
So
yep.
he did what you have to do in that situation to be like, oh, okay.
Yeah. If he does anything else, he does. I don't give him credit right now. Yeah, that's actually a great point. Then you had, before that, we had, in my opinion, the fight that, when it comes to the rankings and the matters in the division, probably could have been the co-main event. Of course, it was a female fight that got buried low on the card. That was Montana De La Rosa versus Vivian Araujo. Vivian Araujo won by unanimous decision. Vivian Araujo is a girl that I've liked a while. She didn't look good in the last fight against Jessica Ai, but her fight against Alexis Davis was one of these eye-opening when I was she put a clinic on Alexis Davis, and I was like, this girl's really good. I'm kind of hoping that Jessica Ai fight was just, and it was a competitive fight, but she couldn't stop some of the takedowns. And she's 33, so I can't get too excited about her. But she still looks like the most complete or the best challenge to Valentina Shevchenko. I'm not saying she's anywhere near Shevchenko. So it's more of a backhand compliment on the division.
No, yeah, we preface this by saying anyone who's in the sport right now, including Alima Lay McFarlane, is at least a 6 or 7 to 1 underdog against Valentina Shevchenko. Right. And probably everyone except McFarlane is at least a 10 to 1 underdog. So within the context of that, I agree that she shows a glimmer of hope.
She's a really great striker. I don't know she slowed down a little bit in the second round, but I don't know what the hell the broadcast was talking about. They would make it sound like it was a really close fight, heading into the third round, and I'm the first round might have been a 10-8. The second round, she won, and Montana La Rosa started landing strikes a little bit, but it was definitely one side. I don't know what they were talking about. To me, this was, then the third round she clearly won, but to me, this was a pillar to post fight where it was all Vivian Araujo, and I actually like Montana La Rosa. I actually think she's someone who's improving on her striking. I don't think it was. It was a bad performance, and it was one-sided. But I actually still like Montana De La Rosa. I think she's a good addition to that. A good fighter in that division too.
Oh man, great! We're gonna have some dissension later on then.
Oh, okay. So obviously, yeah. I mean, the reason why I'm not too low on Montana De La Rosa after this performance is because I'm so high on Vivian Araujo.
Which makes sense. She looked impressive. There was nothing poetic or beautiful about it. Not really anything in the way of highlights you could point to. Pillar to post is the way to put it.
Yeah.
Not only did she win every round, I would argue that she almost won every minute of every round. She just was a step ahead the whole time.
Yeah, so Araujo is now nowhere close to the rankings that Jennifer Maia is, who's fighting for the title. But if Jennifer Maia got hurt or COVID or something like that and had to be replaced and they put in Vivian Araujo, I wouldn't feel any different about the fight. I wouldn't be like, wow, Valentina Shevchenko is really going to kill her. Or wow, the odds are really going to go crazy. I feel like it'd be the same odds as Jennifer Maia. Mm-hmm. And in anything, I actually think she would actually have a better chance than Jennifer Maia. That's still not saying much. That's saying, 15 to 1 underdog to 14 to 1 underdog.
Yep.
And the opening card fight was Cole Smith versus Hunter Asher. Hunter Asher wins a unanimous decision. I like Hunter Asher. He's a good prospect. Anybody who's ever listened to any of these breakdowns, I didn't listen to anything I've ever been on. I like your wrestle boxers. I like wrestle boxers. I've always have those Chad Mendez type guys. Hunter Asher fits that. Hunter Asher's last fight, coming off his first loss against Brian Kelleher, was doing extremely well against Sakai before he slowed down. He slowed down at points of this one, but I think Cole Smith made a mistake because he needed Hunter Asher to gas out, kind of similar to the Michelle Pereira fight, but Hunter Ashley is not going to gas himself out. You have to press not insane pace. You have to press a high pace, and Cole Smith wasn't able to do that. And he needed to stop some of the takedowns. He couldn't have been taken out every time Hunter Ashley wanted. I just like this kid. I think he's got good boxing, good takedowns. Is he going to be a UFC champion? No, but I think I like him. I want to see Hunter Ashley in the future.
I agree. I'm finally getting past my concern that he has the name of an adult film star, and that can't possibly be really the name his parents gave him. I'm 4 fights or 3 fights into the UFC plus his Contender Series fight. I'm finally past that and kind of watching his game on its own merits. And yeah, he is just a gritty, just hard-nosed, classic wrestle boxer, the kind that's always had good success in mixed martial arts as different fads have come and gone, different styles, the whole arms race that we're always seeing going on. There's always a place for a guy with a game like Hunter Asher. And I don't think he's a future title contender just because of the odds. He's in one of the 3 deepest divisions. And so I'm taking the field if you name me any 10-fight veteran. But he's 28 years old. He's probably still improving. Who knows? I mean, he lost to Brian Kelleher. If you'd asked me a few years ago, I would have said Brian Kelleher never makes it to the UFC.
Absolutely.
And all of a sudden, he's quietly one of their breakout fighters of 2020.
Yeah, he's had a great run.
So shows what I know, and I'm not putting a hard cap on what Hunter Asher can do. He looked really good.
Yeah, I mean, so back to the whole wrestle boxing thing. The reason why I think I'm so biased for wrestle boxing, if I continued my MMA career, I would have been a wrestle boxer. That's a very slow. I'm a short, stockier guy, like these wrestle boxer guys, and I come from a wrestle background. That's why I'm so. I love my wrestle boxers. As far as Brian Kelleher, you mentioned you didn't think Brian Kelleher would be UFC. I got one that tops that. Calvin Kattar was a guy who came up in the region that I'm from. And when he was brought into the UFC, I was like, oh, that's nice. It's nice that he's got the rest of his career get to be called a UFC veteran. I thought it was going to be 0-2 and see you later. And now he's headlining UFCs and a legit shot that, everything breaks right. He could be the champion one day. So what the hell do I know? And every time I bring up Calvin Kattar, I'm going to keep mentioning that because, hey, if every time John Jones gets brought up, I get to mention how I called him the greatest fighter ever, I got to take my losses too. So there you have it. We did all 7 fights. We exhausted ourselves. I don't know how we made it through all 7 of them, but we did. Let's get to the Bulls. Do you want to do the cut list or do you want to do the Bulls and the Bears?
We can do the cut list, but I'll, spoiler, I don't have any.
Really? I'm going to throw one. I'm going to throw Imadaev. He's lost 3 in a row in the UFC.
Which is, that's fine with me. If they let Imadaev go, I will not be throwing my hands up with rage. It would be one thing if he, was the guy who got robbed out of a victory on Saturday, but he wasn't. Yeah. He just got robbed out of surviving another 20 seconds maybe. So, if he goes, I'm fine with it.
You know what? You made a good point about the 21 seconds. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to say you convinced me with he did get short on 21 seconds, so I think his next fight should be a 21-second fight. Once it hits 21, the fight's over, the other guy wins.
All right, sounds good.
Let's do the. I only have 2 for the Bulls and the Bears for both of them. I didn't go 3. I cut down my Bulls and the Bears to go with the theme. You want to do Bears or the Bulls?
Let's do the Bears first. I like getting the bad news out of the way.
All right.
And if you only have 2, then you go first because I have 3, so I can go around you and not repeat all of your stuff.
So my number 2 is I'm going to go with Alonzo Menifield. This is 2 fights where I picked him to win. I thought he was going to beat. I thought that the mistakes he made in his previous fight, I thought he'd be able to fix it against Overeem and Sapru. I thought he was going to have co-main event. I have, just like I love wrestle boxes, I have this crazy love affair for Fortis MMA. I'm so biased to those guys. I always, if I have a tiebreaker between fights, I'll go with Fortis MMA. Alonzo Menifield has looked very bad in his last 2 fights. But my number 1 fail, I'm going to put this less on the stock going down and more on I forgot to explain what the Bulls and Bears, someone's never listened. Bulls and the Bears is just a stock market reference. When the stock market's a stock is going up, it's a bull market based when there's a bull charges with its horns up. If it's going down, it's a bear market because a bear will charge you with its head down. That's the Bull and the Bears reference. I'm going to go with Michel Pereira, but not his performance, but his call out afterwards. This guy finally gets a UFC win after a 2-fight losing streak. and he calls out Jorge Masvidal. My man, if Leon Edwards can win like 45 fights in a row, whatever streak he's on, and he can't, and got pretty much sucker punched by Jorge Masvidal, and still can't get a fight, like with the BMF, like, dude, my man, you're not gonna get Jorge Masvidal. Like, don't waste your call out on that. That is my bear. Who do you have for your bears?
Just, like, I'm sorry, Pereira couldn't get a picture with Jorge Masvidal right now. Like, I did have Minifield as well. You already summed it up. So all I'll say is that I came out of the Devin Clark fight thinking there were some positive takeaways, because even though he was obviously exhausted, he was throwing offense and trying to win the fight, even in the last minute, as his body was just clearly quitting on him. And so, yeah, this was especially disappointing.
Can I stop you that and ask you a question? Do you feel more that it's now, like, did that, like, him being able to fight through and actually rock Devin Clark several times while he was hurt? I feel like that says more about Devin Clark now than positives on Minifield. Do you feel the same way or no?
I hadn't really thought of it like that, but I do need to kind of reassess that. And the next time Devin Clark fights, and I'm kind of doing the, pre-event tape study, that'll come up in my mind.
Sure. Sorry, continue. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No. Yeah, like maybe he should have been able to shut the door more emphatically in the second and third rounds. Augusto Sakai, there's no shame in losing to Alistair Overeem in 2020. That's something we're learning. We spent the first 15 minutes of the show just talking about how amazing and ageless he is. But it's never a good time to lose a fight. But for Sakai, he was on a 6-fight winning streak, the last 4 in the UFC. He's in a division starving for young title contenders, and a lot of the guys in the top 10 have fought each other multiple times. This was a bad time to lose one. So, I mean, just in the literal sense of his ranking and perception, his stock is down after Saturday night. Sure. This was a bad time to take a step back.
All right, I'm going to interrupt you again because I got another question to ask you. Mm-hmm. When you think of Sakai now, and this was his, like we talked about, was his first main event against a guy who's been in it so many times, in Alistair Overeem, and he kind of failed. A lot of guys, you go back to the drawing board, a lot of guys will learn from that. Do you feel like this guy's going to learn from that and, like, be so much better next time? Or do you feel like, no, we have such a huge hole, so you feel more like this would be,
he'll learn. Like, I mean, his first career loss where he lost to Shek Congo, the Augusto Sakai of 2020 does not lose that fight. Like, he took the lessons and walked away from the Congo loss a better fighter. I have to imagine he'll have to do it here again. And again, it's not a matter of completely retooling his game or learning some like magical new death touch that he just never knew before. It's just a matter of learning to impose his pace on a fight. Yeah. And
I kind of wish Shek Congo was in the UFC because that actually matchup would make a lot of sense right now.
It would, and I'd favor Sakai heavily in that rematch.
Yeah, I think I would too.
And Sakai, still only 29, has a built-in skill set that he can lean on. He's a very good, Muay Thai influenced striker. We've not seen the best of Sakai yet, but he's going to have to take a step back. He went from a guy, where if things broke right, he might have a title shot a year from now, to it'll take 2 years.
All right.
And the one where we're probably going to have a little dissension, Montana De La Rosa is on my Bears list. Montana De La Rosa is now 4-2 in the UFC, which sounds pretty good. But if you look at it, the real dividing line is she's beaten the bad fighters and she lost to the good ones. Yeah. And more to the point, she's won the fights where her wrestling is good enough to get it on the ground because she is a very good grappler. I mean, forget about the loss to Mackenzie Dern. Mackenzie Dern outgrapples anybody who wants to grapple her. She is a very good offensive grappler. She's long and she grapples like a tall woman should. Just, great mixture of top control, advancing position, and looking for opportunistic chokes and arm bars. When she can't get it to that position, she has suffered. She lost to Andrea Lee. She lost all 3 rounds, but she was still trying to get it to the ground, throughout. I don't think she attempted a takedown in the last 2 rounds, like a real earnest one against Araujo, even when it was clear that she was getting pieced up. The lack of adjustment between rounds. I don't know if she just needs to fire her whole corner, including her husband. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. But even though there's no real shame in losing to Araujo, because I think she's underrated and underranked, the fact that just she didn't seem to make any adjustments and just kind of went out for the last half of the fight. I'm going to just go out and kind of bravely lose because we've already seen how this fight plays out now. That's discouraging.
Yeah.
Like that's not a good sign because she's not going to be able to just, I don't know if I can use this term, just grapple fuck women in the top 10 of the flyweight division.
Yeah.
Like
I love how Ben warned us. I love how he warned us. He was so nervous.
Yeah. I if she wants to make it into the top 10, if she wants to make a serious run at the title, which at 25 years old, we assume that's what she wants.
Yeah.
What she brought to the cage on Saturday is not going to do it.
Yeah, that's the thing. When when you were talking about beating the good one. Losing to the good ones, beating the poor fighters. I was pulling up her records. I don't remember all these who they beat off the top of my head. And I started scrolling through, and then at 25 years old, jumped out to me. Like I was assume she's older. Like I don't know why I assume like she's so young. She's 25. And I'm like maybe because she has like a 14-year-old daughter or something like that.
And she had pro fights when she was 19 years old. I mean, she lost her first 2 fights to just nobodies because she barely knew what she was doing. She's someone who'd been like training for like 6 months.
Yeah.
And just threw her out there because she was athletic.
Yeah.
I mean, hell.
I think it's something where I think she's older because she had a kid when she was like 13 or something.
Yep, that's probably it.
I have no idea how old her kid is, but I know she's pretty young. You want to move on to the Bulls?
Yeah, let's move on to the Bulls.
I'll let you go first this time.
Okay, Bulls. Number 3 is Alistair Overeem. We've already gone into it in depth, so I'm just going to say, you know what? For a guy that was creeping up on even odds when they went into the cage, he looked great. Looks as. I mean, it's almost possible to argue that his position in the division is as good right now as it ever has been, which is a crazy thing to say. Number 2, Ovin St. Preux. I already said, I had St. Preux all the way in this one, even though he was actually an underdog. And for him to go in there as an underdog to a prospect coming off a loss to Devin Clark, he doesn't strike me as the type of guy who reads his own press and cares about it. But if it was me, I would have been pissed.
No, he did. He mentioned that on Twitter. He tweeted out like screw the odds maker who retweet this if you made a lot of money off of me. Like he knew.
Okay,
and he's absolutely right. He's absolutely. I picked Menifield, but it's absolutely right. Like this is the guy who fought for the UFC title, and he's good. That's a great point. That's a great point.
And Menifield's last loss had been clearly just a product of kind of inexperience. I mean, he'd been knocking everyone out in the first round. And meanwhile, St. Preux, he's a 21-fight UFC veteran, So good for him. He's on the older side. It feels like he's been around forever because he has. It's crazy to think that he's another kind of strike force refugee, the same as Overeem was. They both, I think, came over around 2010, 2011. But good for him. Just stock up for doing what he should have done. My number 1 bull is Michel Pereira. Like he finally kind of put together what I'm sure the UFC hoped what he would do, like do crazy spectacular stuff and act like a maniac while still winning the fights. He wasn't Johnny Walker. He didn't come into the UFC undefeated. He came into the UFC with like 7 or 8 losses and like a couple of like weird like no contests and things reversed. So like it's never been about him being unbeatable, but he has to show he can show up and beat a worse fighter than himself without just tripping over his own feet. He did that, and that's a big sign. That's a good sign. And if we're just talking about bulls and bears from the strict stock market standpoint, he is the guy that did his own stock the most good on Saturday night.
Yeah. I was when you were talking about, I want to bring up Devin Clark. You talked about, you made a great point. Like Devin Clark, if you lose to Devin Clark, this is the guys that Devin Clark has beaten in the UFC. Josh Stansbury, Jake Collier, Mike Rodriguez, Darko Stojic, Daquan Townsend, and Alonzo Menifield. Like, take out Menifield. The other guys is either out of the UFC or very, very bottom of the barrel UFC light heavyweights. It's not often you lose to Devin Clark and then you get a co-main event and favored over a former title challenger. That's a great point. I'll go with my bulls. I only have two. I almost put like a cheesy one, like BJJ was on the rise because we had two good submissions with Kelleher and Munoz. My number two was Michelle Pereira. I'm not going to go too much into it. You've already said it. My big thing is why his stock rose so much is this guy lost to Tristan Connolly, and I almost picked him to lose to Zalim Imadaev, and now I'm like, oh, this guy's a problem to the division. Like he could be a contender. It's like I went one extreme to the other. And then my number one is just the legacy of Alistair Overeem, because we don't talk. We don't. I want this to be as organic, and we don't talk. Like we don't say like, hey, I'm going to say this, I'm going to say that. We just kind of just go. We just hit record and start talking. The thing about when I knew I was going to do like questions about the legacy of Overeem. I had a feeling that you were going to feel the same way as I did. Like guys that we normally don't think that Alistair Overeem's on the same level of, like he's not only on the same level, he's past them. So I think more and more people are going to start feeling that way about Alistair Overeem. So that's why I think the stock of Alistair Overeem is the big winner of the night. Last question for you: how did you grade the overall card?
Oh, it's hard for me to give too high a score to a 7-fight card that had really one fight with top 10 implications. I give it a C+ because it was not waste too much of my time. If they had imposed like pay-per-view and like ESPN undercard timing on this, so it took 8 hours of my day, this thing probably get a D. But I give it a C+. It was entertaining, didn't waste my time, and we had just a bunch We've had plenty of interesting stuff to talk about, even though there were only 7 fights.
All right, there we did. We have recapped it. I'm going to put you on the spot. We have a big weekend of MMA coming up. We actually have 2 Bellator cards and a UFC. Let's start with. I'm going to ask you just in the main events. Go on the record. Who wins? Lyoto Machida, Phil Davis.
Phil Davis.
All right. The second, I agree. Second night of Bellator. This is much harder fight in my opinion to pick. Juan Archuleta or Patrick Mix.
Give me Patchy. I'm a believer.
Yeah, I don't know. Like on the feet, I like Archuleta. Mix, I like on the ground. Tough call. I might go Archuleta just for have dissension between us. But that one, I'm gonna give me a pass on that because I got to do a little film study on that one. That one I'm not nearly as confident. I could do some more film study. Main event in Vegas is the new main event: Michelle Waterson versus Angela Hill. Yes, that is actually the main event: Michelle Waterson versus Angela Hill. Who do you like that one?
I like Angela Hill in it. I think she's finally coming into her own. I don't know if we've had this conversation, but she for the longest time has been one of my scream at the TV fighters, where I've just kind of watched her lose lackluster decisions to less skilled women just because she just wouldn't seem to pull the trigger. She seems to be pulling out of that. Like she's shown a little more killer instinct, a little more urgency. And beyond that, the skills are all in place. They always have been. Meanwhile, Waterson's always been an overachiever. Yeah. Beating bigger women by like bullying them around and wrestling them. They call her the karate hottie, but she's best as a grinder, even against bigger women.
That's right.
I think those are going to meet. It's a really close matchup in my mind, but give me Hill by a nose.
Yeah, this is a tough one. Angela Hill has that. She did have that female John Dodson, who I will never pick again in a fight. But yeah, definitely had that female John Dodson thing going on. This is another one, man. I'm going to say the same thing I just said about the Archuleta fight. For the recording's sake, I'll go with Michelle Waterson, but I might change my opinion by the time we make our picks. So it's another one I'm very on the fence. There you guys have it. Ben is being very like to the point, making predictions. I'm riding the fence, but guys, there we have. We have done all.
You never gave this card a grade.
Yeah, I like the C+. Like definitely the 7 card cancel-ins. There wasn't a lot of star power to make it. There wasn't a sexy main event. So I feel like it kind of had in the Olympics or gymnastics, like you could do a move perfect, but you have a level of difficulty you can only get so high. I kind of feel like that's how this like a B is like the highest this could have got. So I'll give it like a C+, B, maybe a B-, sure. Okay. Guys, we'll be back next week. With the UFC Fight Night. Well, maybe even sprinkle in a little bit of Bellator for you guys. Real quick overview of that as we already go deep enough as it is. Some exciting fighters next week. See you then, guys.